So yesterday, the Las Vegas Raiders released defensive tackle Christian Wilkins, and we got a pretty interesting update regarding why the Raiders kind of released this guy. But with releasing Christian Wilkins, the Raiders have now pivoted, and they've started to look forward to what they can do without Christian Wilkins. And one of the things that the Raiders tried at practice today is they've essentially moved Tyree Wilson to the 3 technique. This is something we talked about in yesterday's video when Christian Wilkins was ultimately released. But I want to talk about this, man. So there's a couple of training camp updates that are coming out, obviously, right? And we're going to be covering a lot of these different things, these different reports. But the first thing we're going to talk about is Tyree Wilson. So Jesse Merrick put this out there. He said it's nothing new, but Tyree Wilson is getting some reps with the ones at the 3 technique too. This is something you want to hear, right? You want to hear Tyree Wilson taking those snaps at the 3 technique. And that too, like, one of the things that I think is going to be very, very important as the Raiders kind of get into it is, if Tyree Wilson does take snaps at the 3 technique, I am hoping that the Raiders consistently let him get snaps. I don't want him taking 7 snaps a game at the 3 technique, 7 snaps as a wide 9, 7 snaps as like a 5 technique. I want this guy to take 40 snaps at the 3 technique. Just let him play that position, right? Let him get after it from the inside. And that's kind of what it looks like he might be doing this season. Now, it is also important to note, about 2 days ago, before the Raiders even released Christian Wilkins, Maxx Crosby had already told us that Tyree Wilson was, at least the plan for him was so he gets a lot of snaps on the inside. And I think at this point, I think it's going to be something good for Tyree. To me, Tyree Wilson just hasn't really worked out on the edge. He can always be the guy that, like, any given game, if he plays 50 snaps, he'll make a couple plays, but generally speaking, he's not going to be a disruptive force in terms of pass rushing. And I don't know if he's ever going to truly develop that, but if he moves to the 3 technique, maybe there's a chance over the course of his career, he can really develop into a good, productive defensive tackle. To me, I love the fact that this guy's getting snaps at the 3 technique, but again, it is important to note this is not necessarily anything new, but it is important that he is getting snaps, especially given that the Raiders released Christian Wilkins, and the plan going forward will be, Tyree Wilson will be one of the guys to rotate in. Now, Tyree Wilson wasn't necessarily the first guy to get those snaps. In fact, Jesse put it out there saying Jonah Laulu continued to get the first crack at the 3 technique with the number 1 defense. So there it is, right? Jonah Laulu is going to be the guy for the Raiders right now. He'll be the guy we're going to rely upon. He'll be the guy that has to go out there and potentially have success for the Raiders. Lualu was okay last year, right? He wasn't a bad football player. Given the fact that I believe he was either in his second year last year, he may have even been a rookie, but this guy's a super, super young football player, right? He's like 25 years old. And the fact that he's taking snaps with the first team unit at that 3 technique spot, to me, at least has me fired up that this guy could actually become a good football player. Now, obviously, we're not going to replace Christian Wilkins, production. We're not going to replace that this season. It's just not going to happen, realistically speaking. But the best thing we could do is someone else kind of step up and start to flash a little bit. Jonah Laulu could potentially flash a little bit for the Raiders. He has been getting some of the first team snaps. When the Raiders get into base defense specifically, he'll be out there. Adam Butler will be out there. They've had a couple different guys rotating in at nose, right? Loku Fodu is another guy that's kind of been rotating in a little bit. There's a couple other guys, Zachary Carter, another guy that's been playing a little bit with the first team unit, especially in base defense. But keep in mind, Jonah Laulu, when the Raiders are in their nickel defense, he'll be one of the guys that's going to be out there. I do find it interesting though, if he's playing the 3 technique, does that mean Adam Butler is playing that 1 technique? Right? I find that very, very interesting, and I think that's something as we go forward, we got to just kind of keep an eye on, because I do think Adam Butler is our best defensive tackle. But there's also a chance that Laulu ends up, at some point becoming more productive than Adam Butler. And if that happens, it's a huge positive for the Raiders. Now, I also want to just kind of back it up, right? So Jonah Laulu is going to get some of those snaps at the 3 technique. I use the first guy specifically. Tyree Wilson also got some of those same snaps, right? He rotated in. Keep in mind with the first team defense, right? This isn't the second team defense or the third string defense. This is literally still the first team defense. He obviously just rotated in with Laulu. And to me, that's something you want to see happen, right? You want to see this guy develop. You want to see what type of football player he can obviously become. And I'm excited for preseason because we're gonna see Tyree Wilson out there playing a lot. Right? Believe it or not, Tyree Wilson is not Maxx Crosby. Maxx Crosby's gonna, play 15 snaps in one of the 3 games. Tyree might play like 50% of the snaps in each of the 3 games, right? And I'm excited to see what the development looks like with Tyree, given that it is year 3. This is really that year for him to prove it. There was an interesting video that Ezekiel put out there. Is basically Maxx Crosby and Tyree Wilson at training camp. This video is taken from earlier today. These guys are essentially practicing pass rushing, and they're practicing specifically one move, and I kind of want to break it down a little bit. Obviously, you guys will know Maxx Crosby does this move just a lot cleaner. He's a lot better. It's a lot more effective with Maxx Crosby versus Tyree Wilson. He's a little bit slower, and he's, outside of just it being a little bit slower, he's just not as twitchy, as bendy as Maxx. So you guys obviously saw Maxx do it. You guys are going to see Tyree Wilson try to do the same exact move. I'm going to go ahead and just forward this a little bit. So Tyree's going to line up, and you'll see Tyree Wilson do this as well now. It's just not as clean in my opinion, right? Let's go ahead and back this up to when Maxx does this. Also keep in mind, Maxx does this a little bit differently than the way Tyree does it. Maxx is going to get the hands on the coach. This is called the push-pull pass rush move. It's essentially a power to speed move. So Maxx Crosby's going to push the coach here just a little bit, just enough to get the coach to kind of start to lean forward to push back, right, give some resistance. And then Maxx Crosby's going to jump outside, and he's going to dip the shoulder, and he's going to rip as well. And there you see it, right? Maxx Crosby comes in with the rip move, pins that back arm. He ends up beating the coach, and then he tries to get to the quarterback. Tyree Wilson just does it a little bit different, all right? It's just not as clean. The speed element of it's not as good. Tyree really just swims over the top, right? He's going to use a swim move. He's going to push, swim over the top. Right, it's a little bit different. It almost looks like the coach just kind of ducks, just to kind of get out of the way. It's just not as clean, right? The way Maxx does this to me makes sense because the tackle's gonna lean into you a little bit. If you swim over the top, it's just not as clean, right? And you're less likely to win. And I'm gonna show you guys the last clip here. You guys can check it out. Maxx Crosby is going to double hand swipe coach. Coach is gonna put the hands out there. That's just, these hands, man, I'm telling you guys, it's crazy how fast Maxx Crosby is, right? And it's so effective, and we see it every single game, just how quick this guy is, man. It's truly, truly incredible watching Maxx Crosby with his hands kind of move. And, it's crazy because even in college, Maxx Crosby had elite hands, right? But they're not as good back then as they are today. He's just continued to fine tune, continue to develop, and he's gotten to the point where he's actually really, 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 I think Maxx Crosby has the best hands in all of football. I think he has the best pass rush, specifically the technique aspect of it in all of football. I don't think there's a player better than Maxx Crosby. To me, just an elite football player. Hopefully Tyree develops just a little bit more. We also have another report that's coming out here. So the Raiders actually did go out there and they did sign another defensive tackle. They actually claimed a guy that the Tennessee Titans released yesterday. And I want to talk about this guy a little bit because Keondre Coburn has a ton of upside for the Raiders. Massive football player. And I think this is exactly what the Raiders needed. I look at the Raiders defensive line and I look at it and I say, who's going to be the Raiders, nose tackle in base defense? Who's going to be the Raiders' one technique, right? Christian Wilkins was a guy that I think could have played a lot of one technique for the Raiders. Obviously, the Raiders released him. And I think Coburn's one of those guys that could potentially replace him a little bit. This guy's about 6'2", 335 pounds. He's like a true nose tackle. Absolute massive football player. And the Raiders were giving him essentially, he was released. Obviously, there's probably a couple other teams that may have wanted him. The Raiders ended up getting him off the waivers. And again, just kind of thinking about what this guy provides the Raiders. I was watching some of his tape. The guy actually has some upside. The guy actually has some ability against the run. Now, as a pass rusher, there's not a whole lot there at this point. He is still young, but this is something I want to continue to watch this guy develop. Right? What does he become as time kind of goes forward? Texas, which is where Keondre Coburn's from, has produced a lot of really good defensive linemen. And Coburn came out, I believe, 2 years ago. So I think there's still a lot of potential and upside with him. For all the different defensive tackles that the Raiders have at this point, I want to see some of these guys step up. I want to see which guys will get aggressive and which guys will answer the call from the Raiders coaching staff. Right, Christian Wilkins is no more. We need someone to step the hell up. Maybe it's Jonah Laulu. Maybe it's Keontae Coburn. Maybe it's one of the rookie defensive tackles. I want to see which guys will step up. Maybe it's Tyree Wilson. Or maybe as he kind of jumps over to the 3 technique, maybe Tyree Wilson is the guy for the Raiders. And there's a couple of the training camp updates that I'm going to get into here in a second. So they did sign Keontae Coburn. Obviously, the reason you bring this guy in is because you released Christian Wilkins. I want to go ahead and just give you guys the final update on Christian Wilkins because the official story is out there, right? The official story of exactly what happened and why the Raiders released him. In my opinion, you can put it together as what basically happened. So back on June 4th, I don't think this was public, so no one really knew that this was happening behind the scenes. But on June 4th, the Raiders actually voided Christian Wilkins' guaranteed money. Right, so this is a long time ago, right? 50 days ago from this point, the Raiders voided this guy's guaranteed money. And they used some sort of language within that. Specifically, let me go to this article. Specifically, what the Raiders did was the Raiders voided the guaranteed money left on his deal. And that was due to failure to maintain his physical condition to play. So that's what the Raiders said, right? The failure to maintain the physical condition to play. The Raiders went ahead and voided his guaranteed money. Again, June 4th is a long time ago. And the Raiders went ahead and voided it back then. And Christian Wilkins had 50 days to basically, fight that, right? Basically appeal that. All Christian Wilkins had to do was hit up the NFL Players Association and tell them that, hey, I disagree with that. I'm going to go ahead and appeal that. He had 50 days to do this. So the Raiders did this. On the 50th day, the very last day Christian Wilkins had to appeal this, he actually went ahead and filed the grievance, right? He went ahead and said, hey, I'm going to go ahead and appeal that decision by the Raiders. I don't agree with it. And the day that the Raiders found out that he did that, the Raiders decided to cut him. To me, I think this makes a lot of sense for the Raiders. At the end of the day, Christian Wilkins already got a ton of money from the Raiders, right? He got like $40 million guaranteed or whatever it was that he ended up getting, all to play like 4 or 5 games. And truth be told, if the Raiders are telling you to get surgery because it's the best thing for you, you should have listened and you should have done it. Not only did Christian Wilkins not do that, but then what would have been fair to the Raiders, in my opinion, is that they void that guaranteed money, right? I think that's just a fair thing to do here. You're not healthy. You haven't played. You didn't play in your first year for most of that year. You're not healthy in the offseason. You're not ready for training camp. I think it's fair that the Raiders say, hey, you have 4 years left on your contract. We're going to void your guarantees. But if you get healthy, right, if Christian Wilkins got healthy, the Raiders could have easily redone his contract and just put those guarantees right back into it. There's no reason why he couldn't eventually gotten that money. But he decided that I'm going to go ahead and appeal. And I'm not going to let the Raiders void my $35 million. Keep in mind, this is money that he was going to get in the future. Not this year, not last year, right? This was all money going into next season and beyond. And as soon as he went ahead and filed that appeal, the Raiders decided it was time to move on. Now, Pete Carroll obviously talked about it earlier today in his presser. He obviously gave his thoughts and insight into what they thought. He talked about how, they sat down, they talked about it. It was a hard decision, but they ultimately decided to cut ties and move forward. Now, I'll be honest with you guys. I think that's the wrong decision that the Raiders made. I think the Raiders should have stuck it out and they should have let him get healthy. Even if he's not ready for this year, you've already guaranteed him money for this year. You've already paid him almost $30 million. That money's going nowhere. I think the Raiders should have kept him around. He would have still had 3 years. Even after this year, I understand why the Raiders, essentially decided we're going to move off of him. I don't personally agree with it. I will, that's my personal opinion. Not everybody's going to agree with me saying that. I understand that, it is what it is. I don't agree with it, right? That's just my personal opinion, but I do understand why the Raiders did it. And that's it, right? So the Raiders are essentially releasing him because he decided, I'm going to appeal. I'm going to make this into a bigger situation. The Raiders didn't agree with it. The Raiders felt he wasn't doing everything he could have to be fully healthy. With that, that's the end of that, right? Christian Wilkins, some team out there is going to try to sign him, right? And until he's fully healthy, until he can pass a physical, I'd be surprised if a team signed him. There's been a report that the Giants are interested in Christian Wilkins. We'll see when this guy can actually get healthy, right? From what I'm hearing, Christian Wilkins is not going to be able to play this year, right? The foot is not, it's not healthy. It's not ready. And the fact that he doesn't want to get surgery, I don't think he's going to be able to pass a physical, right? But regardless of that, let's put that to the backside. Let's talk about some of these training camp updates that are coming out. A lot of really, 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 really good things. Things that you want to hear, right? These are things that, like, it actually excites you. Even though the Raiders had this entire unfortunate offseason drama kind of drag, we still have a season that's coming up, and we have a game in like 15 days from now. I think the Raiders are still a good football team no matter what anybody says. Offense is so much better. Defense is a lot better. We have talent all around this football team. And more than that, the most important part, minus the actual physical players, I'll be honest, I think coaching is more important than players, right? I don't think there's a huge difference between, like, you know, like outside of your top 5 best players, you know, when you get down to like the 6th, 7th player, there's not a huge difference between the Raiders' 7th best player and the Chiefs' 7th best player, right? The difference is really like the top 3 or 4 guys. And then coaching, I think, is the most important element. The Raiders have legit coaching, right? And some of these guys are even stepping up this year. So Levi Edwards said that, you know, we've seen a lot of 2 tight ends catch touchdowns today. I'm sorry, he said we've seen 2 tight ends catch touchdowns today. The first was a dot from Aiden O'Connell to undrafted free agent Carter Runyon. The second was from Geno Smith to Michael Mayer. You know, I spoke to the guy that is at camp that I've always been speaking to for the last like year and a half. And he told me the Raiders this year, and I asked him specifically, right? Yesterday I asked him specifically to focus in on this. And when I asked him about it today, he said the Raiders are utilizing a lot of 2 tight end personnel packages. So a lot of 12 personnel, essentially. Not surprising, right? I think the Raiders are going to come out here with a lot of 1 tight end, 3 wide receivers. But I also think they're going to utilize 2 tight ends, 2 receivers just as much. Like, I don't think they're going to be in the 11 personnel that much more than the 12 personnel. I think it'll probably be about even. In fact, I think when you add up 2 tight end and 3 tight end sets, I think we're going to see more of that than just 1 tight end sets, right? I truly think the Raiders are going to utilize Michael Mayer so much more this season. And he's been flashing, right? Pete Carroll's talked about it. Chip Kelly's talked about it. Some of the reporters have talked about it as well. I think there's a chance Michael Mayer is going to end up having like 700-800 yards this season. I think Brock Bowers will have anywhere from like 1,000 to 1,200 once again. It'll just depend on how many targets he has. I think Michael Mayer is going to be really, really close to that. Maybe like 300-400 yards less, right? But I think Michael Mayer is going to end up getting like 50-60 targets this season. And I think he's going to end up having a really productive year. I'm going to be honest. I think Jacoby Myers, Dante Thornton, Trey Tucker, I think they're going to see dips in their numbers, right? Dante's obviously a rookie, but I think we're going to focus in on getting the tight ends the ball a lot more this season. I don't know why. I just have a feeling the Raiders are going to spread the ball out, obviously, but I think they're going to be a run-first team, so there's that element of it. But I think they're going to utilize Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer a ton. In fact, just based off the conversations I've had, the Raiders are utilizing a lot of 2 tight end sets, 3 tight end sets, and it seems like Chip Kelly wants to focus on, he wants to focus in on having multiple tight ends out there. We've heard a lot of good things about Ian Thomas, and he's our 3rd tight end, right? And, just to kind of sum it up, one of the things that the Raiders will do this year, based off of what Pete Carroll's told us, is we're going to run the football. That means you got to have tight ends out there essentially blocking, right? And we're definitely going to see a lot of that as we kind of go forward. And I'm excited as hell. I think the best way to win is to run the football. I really do think that. A team like the Ravens have kind of shown this to us. They always win so many football games. And the way they do it is by essentially running the football, right? They bring in Derrick Henry. If it's not Derrick Henry the year before, they had J.K. Dobbins and like 2-3 other running backs. The best way to win football games is to be conservative and run the football. And if you can have success running the football, passing lanes wide open, or they get wide open. Harbaugh came into the Chargers last year, and they had a great year because they ran the football, right? And I think with the Raiders and that strategy that Pete Carroll has, I think we're going to find a lot of success, and I think we're going to see Michael Mayer, Brock Bowers, even Ian Thomas get a lot of reps this season, right? So again, A lot of tight end work. Really, really happy to hear some of the stuff that we're hearing. A couple other things coming out. Obviously, the Raiders are going to feed the tight ends a little bit. With that, in practice, the defense knows kind of what you're going to do. So defense always has they always have a little bit of an advantage over the offense because they know what's kind of coming. Today, Raiders safety Lonnie Johnson picked off Geno Smith on a throw that was intended for tight end Brock Bowers. And based off what I'm hearing, it's a pick six, right? Lonnie Johnson took it basically the distance. I believe it was a pass out towards the flat. Not necessarily flat, but like towards the, Brock Bowers running towards the sideline, and Lonnie Johnson jumped it and intercepted it, and he ran it back. Here's the interesting thing with Lonnie Johnson getting this pick off of Geno Smith. Lonnie Johnson's kind of been thought of as an afterthought for the Raiders defense, but I think he's going to end up having a legit role for the Raiders. Something tells me that, Jeremy Chinn's going to be the strong safety for the Raiders. Something tells me Isaiah Pola-Mao will be a slot defender, like a nickel player, and I think Lonnie Johnson is going to start as our free safety. Lonnie Johnson is a productive football player. He's had success in the NFL. He's played corner. He's played safety. And he obviously had this interception off of Brock Bowers. Now, I'm not 100% sure if he was lined up like in the slot, but the fact that he was able to have this interception, and this isn't the first interception he's had between OTAs, mini camp, as well as training camp, the guy's been having success for the Raiders, right? And of course, it was meant for Brock Bowers, which is the other thing that we're kind of talking about earlier, or just a second ago, which is the Raiders are going to feed the football to their tight ends. They're going to run the football. Obviously, training camps are no pads is hard because you don't really know if you're going to be able to, if like you're running the football without pads, you don't really know, right? You're not hitting, you're not bringing guys down. You don't really know if guys are going to be able to have success, right? Like a play could be blown dead at the line of scrimmage, vice versa. Maybe he makes a guy miss. Without pads, without going full speed, running, there's really no benefit to it. You're going to throw the ball a lot, especially early on, which I think is also why you're getting guys throwing interceptions and those type of things. But yeah, I'm happy to kind of see some of the reports that are coming out. Another interesting one that we got was by Levi Edwards. He said Darian Porter has been rolling with the first team in training camp, and Pete Carroll made it clear again today he's not scared to play his rookies. There it is, right? So I believe it was 2 days ago, or it might have been yesterday. I think it was actually the first day. Jacorin Bennett was taking some snaps with the first team unit. But it wasn't just Jacorin Bennett. Sam Webb had some first team snaps. Darian Porter is taking first team snaps. Eric Stokes is taking first team snaps. But the one consistent that has been happening is Darian Porter has been continuously getting first team snaps. And this is a huge positive for the Raiders. This is a great sign, actually. And I say that because Darian Porter fits the scheme that Pete Carroll's trying to run, right? He fits the mold of cornerbacks. And when this guy was starting for the Raiders back in OTAs and minicamp, I told myself, I said, hey, there's no helmets, or at least it's not helmets in the general sense. They're not going full speed the way they are now, right? Although they're not hitting and running through people, they're going full speed out there. And nothing seemed too fast for Porter at OTAs and minicamp, but that's also carrying over to where we're at now, right? Like Porter's still having success for the Raiders today. That's a huge, 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 huge positive. This guy's a rookie. He has 4 years on his rookie contract. That's the type of production we need out of these guys, right? He's coming in, he's having success, and also don't overlook the fact that Jacorin Bennett's a good football player. Sam Webb is a good football player. They might not be great or elite or starters necessarily, but they're good football players. And maybe Jacorin is, but the fact that a rookie's coming in, Sam Webb's been in the NFL for like 4 or 5 years. The fact that Darian Porter is coming in on day one and he's having success, and he's still having success. He hasn't been demoted, right? The Raiders are throwing things at him. Pete Carroll's talked about it. He's having success. To me, phenomenal report, right? You want to continue to see this guy have success. Now, I think Darian Porter is going to end up starting for the Raiders when that time comes. I think the cornerback opposite of Darian Porter is going to be the one position that's going to kind of be up. I would initially say it's going to be Jacorin Bennett, but that's also me being a little biased because I think Bennett's a good football player. but I don't know if he's a great fit for this scheme. I almost feel like Sam Webb might be a little bit better of a fit. Even Eric Stokes, right, a little bit better of a fit. It's going to be interesting to see which cornerback ends up winning the job out as we kind of get into that process. Which cornerback gets the first opportunity, the second opportunity, who runs with the number one defense, the number two defense. It's going to be really, really, really interesting to kind of keep an eye on this battle because some people even think Porter could end up becoming elite corner, kind of like Richard Sherman. And I don't want to say, and put those expectations on him. But never say never, right? Never say never. Yesterday we talked about Jamal Adams and the fact that he moved, over to the linebacker position. Pete Carroll actually talked about Jamal Adams a little bit. He talked about him who's, he's switching over to the weak side linebacker position for the Raiders. Pete Carroll talked about it in his presser. You guys can go check that video out if you want. But one of the things that Pete Carroll said was that Jamal Adams actually approached Pete Carroll. He approached Patrick Graham. And he told him that, hey, I want to play linebacker. I don't essentially want to play at the inside linebacker position. To me, Jamal Adams coming in, understanding kind of where he's at right now in his NFL career. Jamal Adams isn't playing free safety. He's not running sideline to sideline. That's not his game anymore. But as a linebacker, he's one of the faster linebackers, right? He's in the top 10% in terms of linebackers. And the fact that the Raiders listened and agreed and he understood the assignment as well, they're on the same page, essentially. To me, that's a great fit for the Raiders. The Raiders' biggest need, in my opinion, was not run defense, right? Coming into and this is kind of every season, but this year especially, the Raiders did not have Divine Diablo anymore, and I think Diablo was a good cover linebacker, and even Robert Spillane well outproduced in coverage. The Raiders needed a guy that could cover. Devin White is not a coverage guy. Jalen Smith is definitely not a coverage guy, and Aladdin Roberts even more so is not a cover guy. Coming in, the Raiders did not really have a cover guy, at least going to OTAs and minicamp. The Raiders obviously signed Jermaine Pratt a little late. I think Pratt is a lot better in coverage than some of those other guys, but even then, he's still not technically a guy that you're gonna say, hey, go out there and cover, Travis Kelce, go out there and cover George Kittle. But the Raiders bring in Jamal Adams. I mean, that's a cover linebacker right there. And I absolutely love the fit, right? Because the Raiders had a need for a coverage linebacker. And Jamal Adams feels like he can play that position. I think he can. Pete Carroll thinks he can. And obviously the Raiders brought him in to play that position. And now we have a guy that can actually cover tight ends, cover running backs. And it's also important to kind of note, there's a big difference between playing as a true inside linebacker, a true middle linebacker, and a guy on the weak side. A weak side linebacker, it's just a lot easier, right? It's a lot less physical. It's a lot less contact. I'll give you guys an example of a weak side linebacker versus a strong side linebacker as an example. And you're going to have to follow me as I kind of talk this through. But let's say a team comes out and I'm a linebacker. Say there's two linebackers. We're looking at the offense. The offense might have a tight end on the right side over here. The middle linebacker is now going to get onto that same side, the right side, right? Because that's the strong side. Now, if you run power, for example, the defensive end on that right side is going to set the edge. The linebacker has to take on that guy that's pulling, right? He's going to get into that gap. He's going to hit this offensive lineman. The weak side linebacker, the guy that's away from the tight end, he has to chase this play. He has to use his speed. He has to use his quickness. And he has to come downhill, and he has to be able to make the play in the hole, essentially, right? He's going to be the backside flow. The front guy takes on the block. The backside guy is essentially the guy that's going to flow over there and make that play, right? Jamal Adams at the weak side linebacker position makes a ton of sense. I think it's the perfect fit for him. In fact, I talked a little bit about Jamal Adams and kind of the role that he'll have on Twitter. Jeremy Chin last year for Dan Quinn, he played this unique role, right? He wasn't really a safety for the Commanders. He played more snaps on the line of scrimmage as a defensive end, essentially, right? Not a true defensive end, but Maxx Crosby lines up at edge. He'd be 2 yards outside of that, right? He's still on the line of scrimmage. Jeremy Chin took more snaps at that than he did as a free safety, for example. Jeremy Chin lined up at linebacker, right? Will linebacker. He lined up in the slot over slot wide receivers. Jeremy Chin had that role for Dan Quinn, where he's kind of doing all these different things. And that's the same role that Jamal Adams will have for the Raiders this season. I think Jeremy Chin will get into more of a traditional safety role, and I think Jamal Adams will kind of do something similar to what Chin did for Dan Quinn last year, where he'll line up on the line of scrimmage, he'll play weak side, a linebacker for the Raiders, and he has been practicing with the linebackers, right? So keep in mind, Jamal Adams is not practicing with the safeties. He's not over there with the defensive backs coach. He's in there in the trenches, right? He's there with Jermaine Pratt. He's there with some of the other guys, right? Jalen Smith and Amari Gainer and all those guys. So I love what the Raiders are doing with Jamal Adams, and I could not tell you guys how excited I am to watch this guy. Again, I don't know where he's at in his development. I watched some of his snaps from the most recent snaps that he's kind of taken over the past 2 years. Not a whole lot, but I've watched him. He's definitely lost a step, but you could tell that like the most recent season that he's played, he looked a little bit more comfortable. And I think he'll be a lot better this year, given that, he's had a couple years now post-injury. He's been working out. And he claims he's in the best shape of his NFL career. So we'll see what ends up happening. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. And if you did, consider subscribing. And I will see you guys next time with another video.